Moikka ja oikein paljon tervetuloa Eurooppa-foorumiin. Minä olen juontajanne Kaisla Kontkanen ja täällä on alkamassa pienen näyttämön keskiviikon viimeinen paneeli Comprehensive Security and EU's Research and Innovation. Paneelin kielenä tulee olemaan englanti, joten jatkan juonnon loppuun englannin kielellä. Welcome to the Little Stage's last program of the day, which is going to be Comprehensive Security and EU's Research and Innovation. We are going to hear a fascinating keynote and a panel discussion about the future of the European Union's research and innovation and how these matters contribute to comprehensive security. The chat is open, and if you want to participate in the discussion, read the QR code seen on the screen here. The panel is brought to you by the joint efforts of University of Turku, Aapo Academy University, Turku University of Applied Sciences, Novia University of Applied Sciences, and the Turku and Southwest Finland EU office. Welcome everyone.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, and also our participants here on the stage. Like we heard, next we are going to turn our attention to the questions of comprehensive security and European Union's research, development and innovation policies. My name is Markku Jokisipilä and I hail from the University of Turku. I'm a professor there and also leader of Center for Parliamentary Studies, and I will be a chairman and moderator for this session. Our coming session has two parts. First, we are going to hear a keynote speech by one of the leading European voices in the field, Mr. Marc Lemaitre, Director General of Research and Innovation at the European Commission. Lemaitre hails from Luxembourg. In his keynote speech, he is going to shed light on the critical and long-term objectives and the needs for EU's R&I policy and funding, how these contribute to strengthening the comprehensive security in Europe. We are very much looking forward to hear his views on these ongoing topical initiatives, including the dual-use technologies, and explore the potential impact of R&I policies and programs. Then, after Lemaitre's keynote speech, two additional panelists will join the discussion, namely, there in the middle, Anita Lehikoinen, Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland, and Jani Erola, Professor and the leader of Invest Research Flagship Center in the University of Turku. Very much welcome to all three of you. Now, Mr. Lemaitre, before I let you start, I have to ask, because it interests me, how have you liked Turku and Eurooppa-forum so far? Is this maybe your first time here in Turku?
Well, indeed, it's the first time, and I am discovering what I must say looks like an extremely vibrant and attractive city. And I certainly have enjoyed very much the scene setters of this morning. I might refer, in fact, to one thing which Prime Minister Orpo said this morning, which was music to my ears. And so I'm extremely grateful for your invitation to have me here at the European Forum this year.
Okay, welcome to Turku, and it's great to have you here. Now the floor is yours, please.
I will stand up here because I need something to hold my one-pager. And this is just what I needed. So, Markku, thank you very much for your very kind introductory words to start with. As I could say, I am really pleased to be able to engage in this Eurooppa-forum, which by now I understand is quite a tradition of this city. And in fact, there are two more specific reasons why I am pleased to be here in the edition of 2024. The first reason is that we are at quite an exciting juncture, going through institutional change in Brussels, which means also reflecting on our priorities. By now, President-elect von der Leyen has shared the political guidelines, as they are called, so what she sees as the priorities for the European Commission and more broadly for the European Union over 2024 to 2029, and I will refer to a few points of greater relevance for research and innovation in those guidelines. But of course, there are a lot of details that we need to work on to fill these guidelines with substance and eventually to transform them into initiatives over the coming years. So the timing is great. But secondly, I also cherish the opportunity to talk for once a bit about research and innovation in what is a more unusual context, which is security and comprehensive security. The link between the two, I think, is pretty obvious. Comprehensive security needs economic strength, at least security over the long term needs economic strength, and we see that the terrible war which is raging in Ukraine is also one of economic strength over time. And for comprehensive security, definitely one also needs to secure sufficient sovereignty in the strategic technologies of the day and of the future. And for that, for basic economic strength and for mastering strategic technologies, clearly a strong and vibrant research and innovation effort is required. So also when thinking about Europe's security, of course also when thinking about Europe's competitiveness, Europe's well-being, one should take an honest look at how we are faring in research and innovation in Europe today. And to me, taking that honest look should lead us to the conclusion that we should continue to be inspired, not only this year, but in coming years, by the Olympic motto, Sitius, Altius, Fortius. You all know that motto, which means faster, higher, stronger. How would I very concretely translate that? I will start with the Altius, higher. Why do we need something higher in research and innovation in Europe? Well, if I take us back to a year already pretty far back, but when Finland was already a member of the European Union, 2002, I believe, Europe set itself as goal to spend 3% of GDP on research and innovation. 1% should come from public means and 2% should come from private business expenditure. Back then, in 2002, we were at a level of expenditure of more or less 1.8% of GDP. And so we aimed for 3%. Where are we 22 years later? We have progressed, but we are still very far from 3%. We are at 2.2%. So to judge whether the glass is half full or half empty, I think it's important to compare with the rest of the world. How has the rest of the world evolved over the past 20 years? Well, there clearly we see that the gulf has widened, and some who were way below us have surpassed us by now. The gulf has widened with the US, with Japan, with South Korea, and China has surpassed us by now. China is at 2.4% of GDP. So Europe clearly has a problem of how high its monetary efforts are in research and innovation. Within this equation, we should also reflect on the right division of labor when it comes to public efforts between what is pooled together through the European budget to fund the European research program and what flows through national programs. Today, the proportions are 10% of public means are channeled collectively through the EU budget, through the program called Horizon Europe, and 90% are related to national programs, national decision-making. I think the question arises whether this balance is absolutely the right one. And why do I claim that it is a legitimate question? I think for the simple reason that there are two very fundamental advantages to organizing things at European level. The first one is that the European program ensures the highest level of competition between researchers across Europe, but not only across Europe, in fact, because the program is very open, also embracing the rest of the world. And this arguably secures that the quality of the research funded is of the highest level. The second specificity of the European program is that most of its expenditure goes to projects which are collaborative projects with many participants from very many member states in the EU. And this is something you cannot replicate through national programs. So this is one question I think we have for ourselves for the future, what the right division of labor is between the EU level and the national level. But then I'd like to also say a very strong word of praise towards Finland. Not because I'm in Finland and I'd like to cajole you in any way, but very objectively, the Finnish government has set for itself an extremely ambitious goal going way beyond that European goal of 3% of spending between now and 2030, of achieving progressively by 2030 a level of expenditure of 4% overall. And I find it all the more remarkable because Finland is going through a difficult economic moment, has generally to rather go for belt tightening of public expenditure, and nevertheless is deciding that research and innovation is one, if not the one area where extra efforts should be made. And to me, Finland by that is in fact providing a wonderful example to the other member states, that indeed it is a question of setting priorities, and it is a question ultimately of political choice. We do need, I believe, to make more progress than we have over the past 20 years, over the very next years, to have a more forceful monitoring mechanism of what is happening with R&I expenditure levels. And I believe that the overall economic governance surveillance process that the EU has, which is called the European semester, would be the ideal vehicle to also monitor in an annual fashion how member states are faring. I was speaking of those political guidelines which President-elect von der Leyen has been voted upon. In these, she said that we should put research and innovation at the heart of our economy. And she also announced that we would be increasing research spending, mentioning more specifically 2 of the 3 pillars of the present research funding program, namely fundamental research through the European Research Council and disruptive innovation through the European Innovation Council. So higher spending levels, you will have understood. Secondly, CITUS, faster. The world is spinning faster, it seems, at least in terms of disruptive innovation, yes. Think only of artificial intelligence and what we start seeing as the very broad-based impacts which AI might have on economic production processes, but also more broadly on society, and specifically when it comes to research, the incredible booster it can represent to find faster, to gather new knowledge in a very much accelerated way. So in such a context, we also need to think about being more agile and moving faster. And here, reflecting specifically on the European Framework Program, I think that we need to again look at how heavy it is, look at its rules and try to make them leaner. But we also need to ensure that the program is agile. It is a program which today runs over 7 years. And given how fast evolutions can be, you cannot cast things in stone for 7 years, and you need to be able to adjust your priorities if needed. And then thirdly, Fortius, stronger. Here I think several points would fit very well. The first one is that there is one point of frustration in our research efforts at European level presently. I was talking about the advantages before, but I want to also honestly recognize that we do not have a visibly working link between research efforts and eventual knowledge valorization, exploitation of results, and deployment of new knowledge or technologies that would flow from it. And here we definitely need to reflect on what has worked until now. I think with the European Innovation Council, which finances through risk capital basically startups, which have very promising disruptive technologies. We have a good starting point, but we can definitely get much better still at exploiting the results of research. The second point I'd make is that we might require also a bit of a stronger directionality for the program. again, without being in a straitjacket for 7 years, but thinking about these strategic technologies that we see as absolutely key also for indeed comprehensive security, we might have a bit more of a clear upfront direction given to the program. I can mention there biotech, clean tech, AI itself, and space, for instance. And thirdly, I would mention here also stronger safeguards. Horizon Europe, as I said, is open to the world. We are open to researchers from everywhere, but we do have some rules which allow for limiting cooperation with third countries on certain particularly sensitive topics. We definitely need to refine our approach, how we want to be as open as possible, because we continue to believe that research and research's strength is coming from collaboration, including with the rest of the world. But we also see that the world has become more complex, more risky, and we should definitely not be naive regarding the attitude of other parts of the world. We will want to be inspired by common recommendations that have been agreed by the member states back in May of this year on the topic of research security, and we will definitely want, when it comes to the European level, to live up fully to these recommendations. What are the next steps at European level? I will focus only on the research framework program. You certainly already have heard today that the next proposals for generally the EU budget, the multi-annual financial framework, should come sometime next year. So I would say within the next 12 months or so. That's not a very long time. And during that time, we will also be developing the concrete proposal for the next research framework program. And during that time, we will want to zoom in on these different questions that I have raised. But I see this, as I said, however one replies to the question of the division of labor, in fact, as an effort that needs to be a European effort in a Team Europe spirit on research and innovation, where both our collective decisions at EU level and individual decisions made at member state level, with again Finland as inspiration, would really make a difference compared to the present situation. We need more research and innovation in Europe. We need it quite urgently, and we count on a strong partnership with the member states to achieve that, with the benefit of some shining examples like Finland. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lemaitre. It was a very fascinating and clear presentation, and there were even 3 steps to improve, very specific steps that we could take here in Europe. Now our schedule is such that we try to leave 10 minutes for discussion for the questions and answers in the end, and the chat application is in use, so if something comes to your mind that you want to ask the panelists, then feel free to put your questions there, or then we can also take live questions from the audience some 10 minutes before our session ends. Now I use my power as the chairman of this panel, because there was something very interesting that you mentioned during your presentation. If I remember correctly, you used the term sufficient sovereignty in relevant important technologies. Do I remember correctly? Can you give us an example? When is our sovereignty sufficient in some of the key technologies? When do we know it? What's the limit of this?
Well, that's a that's a tough one. In fact, what I wanted to convey with that is that we should not be obsessed with being fully independent and self-reliant on everything. This is not the kind of world we should crave for, because that sounds much more like, a North Korean philosophy, right? Like you are self-sufficient, you don't need the rest of the world. So I wanted there to implicitly also suggest that we should remain open and we should not fear interdependencies, because this is good for everyone. But we should also not be naive, and we should see where we need to develop or to keep a minimum level of competency in certain technologies, because these would be so fundamental to our economic or to our broader security. So I will not here give any particular example. One perhaps positive example I can give of an effort which was a collective effort and which can provide inspiration for what we can do together by being stronger together at European level is the example of supercomputers. We were 10 years ago nowhere in Europe in the ranking on supercomputers. They were all in the US or in China, top 10. Today, because we decided, I say 10 years ago, it's possibly a bit less, to pool our means and to have a program of investment in supercomputers in Europe, today that picture has fundamentally changed, and we have quite a number, I don't remember how many, perhaps 5 of the top 10 places in Europe. And one of those supercomputers, in fact, is in Finland. It's called Lumi, if I'm not mistaken. Why do I give that example now? Because we also see that supercomputer capacities, calculation capacities, seem quite instrumental for the next revolutions. I was talking about AI, to develop fundamental models, large language models on which AI is based. You need a lot of computing capacity and of specific computing capacity. So these are the kinds of examples I would give where we need European capacity, which we control ourselves.
Yeah, thank you for this. It was an important remark, and I think that this is at the very core of the issue, this balancing act between being open and collaborating globally, and then at the same time being able to safeguard European interests to a sufficient degree. Yes, okay, and about my questions, some of them are common, so that I will pose the same question to all three of you, then some of them are individual questions, and I will now start with individual, because I think it's quite nice continuation to that, what Mark just said, and it's about the role of academic world in all of this. So, Professor Erola, how do you see the role of universities in ensuring that research contributes to societal resilience while at the same time maintaining ethical boundaries and integrity and academic freedom? And what challenges do you see in balancing the need for innovation in defense and with the protection of academic freedom? Do you see, is there a potential of risk there?
Yeah, I think it depends really about on the field we are talking about. I mean, especially if you think about the tech field, there's probably much more concrete examples of what might be, where these boundaries might be threatened. But let's say that if you come to the social sciences, my own field, then probably there's not that much. But I think in general, I think there's also quite a bit of a difference between the countries within Europe in this area, because I think this kind of idea about the comprehensive security, I think it's kind of a very well understood in the Finnish case, for instance. It has been always like that, and I think it's entirely new in quite a few other places. And so if I go to talk to my German colleagues about this idea, they would be probably really threatened about it, and then in our case it's a kind of a, yeah, of course, why not? But I mean, of course, it's good to remember as well that often these interests also align, and we have, especially from the US, we have plenty of historical examples of that actually, that there have been joint interest even in the soft fields as well. I mean, the most of the game theory key research was, a large part of that was actually funded by the US Defense Ministry, and also the same for my own field, sociology. The classic surveys in the 50s, it must have been probably one of the world's largest surveys at the time. The American soldier was one big boost for the whole field at the time, and of course quite a few things have actually happened because that was made possible. So these interests actually quite often they actually are aligned, and rather than seeing kind of that I would see them as opposite. Okay. Then my next question goes to Mrs. Lehikoinen. Like Professor Erol here just mentioned, we have a long tradition in the thinking of comprehensive, or thinking in terms of comprehensive security in Finland, and we have developed for decades now already models and strategies that cover all sectors of society. And today, this morning, when Prime Minister Petteri Orpo was here, he told us that this new European initiative of the Preparedness Union originated from Finland, and we are very proud of that, of course, here. This Finnish approach to security and preparedness includes not only physical defense, the traditional physical defense, but societal and even cultural resilience. Could you describe how research, innovation, and education, and even culture are included in comprehensive security strategies in Finland and Europe, Ms. Lehikoinen?
This is a very important question for us, and I think that we are still taking further steps in this comprehensive security planning and strategies also in Finland, and obviously we have now good reason for it, because it hasn't always perhaps been so self-evident that the Ministry of Education sits in the same tables when we talk about security policies, but now we are taking very much into account. And when we talk about, obviously, research, development, innovation work, it's self-evident, as Marc Lemaitre said, but also education, and then what we talk about human capital and also social capital. Especially for a nation of 5.5 million people, we have to keep everybody aboard. And this is one of the most important points, for example, I make when I talk in the national defense courses. It's how we take everybody so that they can be educated, and the paths are open for everybody, and we can participate, make sure that our young people participate in society, and especially now we face the situation that we have to perform better in integration policies. We all know that the number of people in Finland is growing only thanks to immigration, but we haven't done too well. For example, in educational paths of newcomers are very different than those who speak Finnish or Swedish as their first languages. So these kinds of topics we now talk about in these tables where we talk about comprehensive security strategies in Finland. And this is actually of big interest for most European countries, and definitely, for example, in US. Because some of the people working in the same fields, they are absolutely astonished to see that education minister and civil servants from education ministry are in these tables with those responsible for the hard security. But now there are also new aspects when we think about the openness of research and academic freedom, academic integrity, and now we have to be aware, we have to avoid being always with blue eyes. We have to know who we are dealing with, and Finnish, actually the research community has been very active in this. We have already a few years ago a joint code of conduct with collaboration with China, for example, and it's a very open process, and it's a public document. And of course, we follow very closely what is happening with the Commission and the recommendation. But the point is that you have to be knowledgeable of the security threats we have, and also there might be a fine line between academic research and innovation, and definitely we need to discuss the idea of dual use, but we in Finland, we are practical, and we have a neighbor, a very aggressive neighbor. So I think at the national level, we will find a solution how we take to these new proposals in FP10, for example, for dual use. It's a discussion, the position paper is not ready yet, but I think that realism also in these circles have a very remarkable standing point nowadays.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Lemaitre, let's take a little bit closer look to FP10, this new framework program. The President-elect of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, outlined in the Commission's policy guidelines from 2024 to 29 that Europe's biggest near future challenges are security number 1, climate change number 2, and competitiveness number 3. So can you give us some examples what, in pragmatic terms, this emphasis on security, strengthening the defense and industrial competitiveness impact this next EU's framework, research and innovation framework program, FP10?
I was referring to potentially giving a bit more of directionality to the program, and I think this echoes well what you referred to there from the political guidelines, but I wouldn't want us to forget about the two latter elements of competitiveness and of sustainability. These will be very central and very important themes, and certainly under the research framework program. Now, when it comes to security, I was listening very carefully, because what is very clear is that Finland also has a lot to teach Europe, given its geographic position and its history. And it's not, I think, a coincidence that President von der Leyen entrusted the drafting of a report on defense and, more generally, I believe, on the resilience of Europe to President Niinistö. So we have definitely a lot to learn there, and I would like to pick up on what the permanent secretary said in terms of realism, or I could also call it pragmatism. We need more pragmatism for the future. What is our starting point? Our starting point, and it's also related to how things are defined in the EU treaties. It does come from somewhere, but we have today this notion that the world of defense and the world of civil research are totally separate. And there are no links between the two, and they follow different rules, two fully separate programs. But the reality, as we are reminded every day, is of course much more complex than that, and this is illustrated by the term dual-use technologies. Ultimately, if we think about it, more or less everything is dual-use technologies or has the potential for being dual-use. So we need to look in a pragmatic way for the future at how we can move away from what is today probably a bit of a hypocritical presentation of things, where we claim that all the research which is happening under the civil research, so the 9th framework program, Horizon Europe, happens only for potential civil applications. Clearly, of all the research that we are funding, quite a bit of that, without too much imagination, could one day find defense applications as well. So the context we are in now, I think, also pushes us in that direction of taking, as I said, a more pragmatic approach to this. And we are certainly still very much in a listening mode, and we are looking forward to that contribution from the Finnish authorities that the Permanent Secretary has referred to, because we will need pragmatic ideas.
Okay, then Professor Erola, it has been mentioned in this discussion for several times that we have an aggressive neighbor here in Finland, and Russia is trying to influence things in all imaginable ways, and this is the reality of today's world, interlinked world and turbulent world, that the risk of foreign interference, even to academic research, is a realistic one, and that has to be taken into account. And I would like to ask you, how do you feel, has the research community prepared itself for this kind of interference? And for example, could the political power holders give help to universities in this sense to prepare and to be more ready to this kind of efforts to interfere with the academic research, especially in those parts of the research field where there are military implications of the results of the research?
Yeah, sure. I think that people are now much more aware about that than previously, but of course we have to remember that researchers tend to be good at one thing, which is their own research. And I guess, but I think the awareness means that people are kind of open also to this kind of a help and guidance as well. Because I think we are realizing that, okay, we shouldn't be so naive, but of course, if we don't know where to pay attention, that's of course a tricky one. And I don't think the academic community can do that themselves. But there we need the kind of course, help from the security officials and so forth, and that's I think that is people are kind of open. But of course, in the practical level, I think the good example was that after the Russian invasion to Ukraine, that the universities jointly decided, okay, we have to cut the ties to the research, and in Russia, and in quite few cases there were of course. People, those who were doing that collaboration, felt that was kind of that was a big thing for them. But of course, there wasn't actually much of an outcry in the end that this was done, because it was felt that this was necessary anyway. So in that way, I think there are actually quite a bit preparedness in there.
Okay, we have two university professors here at the table, so we are very much interested in what is going on in Finland in these terms. And now we have a high official from the Ministry of Education present here, so I have to ask about the Finnish preparations for research and innovation program, which are carried out in cooperation with the Ministry of Education and Culture on the one hand, and then Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment on the other. So how we are in Finland with these preparations, how have the preparations progressed so far, and what are the Finland current priorities in this matter? What are our strategically most important things for Finland in this?
Yeah, we are very closely working together with the Ministry of the Economy and Employment, TEM, And the collaboration is very familiar to us. And then we talk about research, the basic research, obviously, and innovation at the same time. And our standing point is that we want the FP10 also be based on high quality and excellence. So this is a very sort of strong standing point from the Finnish preparations, have been for a long time. But also the collaboration we need definitely, and then also what are the strategic choices. And there I would like to point out, for example, the importance of infrastructure. And LUMI was mentioned, we always must mention LUMI, which is a great example of a strategic importance, because when we talk about different technologies, whether it is 5G, 6G or quantum technologies, they all require supercomputing. And now we are more than happy that Finland, we have actually, the government has made a decision that we are ready to compete for the next generation of LUMI. And it's very important not only to Finland, but for the competitiveness of EU in research and innovation, and also in international collaboration, because we found out, we were told, that LUMI is actually more open to kind of useful research and development work than most supercomputers in the US. So this is important that we make choices, and we have made choices. There we are in a happy position because we are not obviously teaching the rest of member states or the EU, but we all have to make choices. And we have, for example, decided on the flagship program where Professor Eerola is a shining example of, so that it was quality competition. The criteria, what we wanted, was decided by the government. It was the Ministry of Finance, our ministry, and them ministry. And then it was up to the research community to come up with the proposals. So that was a very good example, and I think that we need just this kind of focusing perhaps more also in FP. But it's very important that it's the Citius, Altius, Fortius that you mentioned. Perhaps this describes also in brief our position to FP10.
Okay, thank you. Then to one of the most sensitive points in this whole matter, and I think that's the dual-use technologies which have both civilian and military purposes. And earlier this year there was a commission paper that set out approaches to this matter, how to enhance synergies between civilian and defense research. However, there are some powerful academic university lobby groups which are very much against this whole idea and are saying that both the Horizon Europe and FP10 should remain exclusively civilian. So, Mr. Lemaitre, I would like to ask you, where are we now at the current time with this discussion? Is there still a lot of opposition from the academic circles? And how do you see the potential of dual-use technologies in research and innovation in future?
Well, the paper you referred to was in fact a consultation paper on which we received, I think, close to 300 replies altogether. And in a broad brush, indeed, the academic sector was rather conservative and was rather proning from the three options we had put forward, the status quo, no change. So exactly what the present situation I have described, with two separate worlds, totally separate worlds of civil research and defense research. The stakeholders who were more open to some evolution were the business sector, in fact, the private sector. They were more open, and for those who were more open, they were more open to the kind of option that we had put forward, which would entail the selective opening up of specific topics under the next framework program, which would, I guess, naturally entail more defense potential as well. Again, I would personally repeat on this that the time has come to revisit the setup, to have less of a Chinese wall between the civil and the defense world, and when it comes to the civil research efforts, to be more realistic or more pragmatic, and to indeed acknowledge and accept that some of the research efforts might also find applications in the field of security and defense at one point in time. This is anyway the reality of today. It is beyond doubt that some of the research efforts funded under the framework program one day end up being useful for some defense applications. It is a reality. So I think the key term again is to be more pragmatic, to also respond better to the needs of our times.
So, Professor Elo, you want to comment on this?
I really think that the most of the academic community would be actually very surprised even to have this discussion about that there would be actually this kind of a dual option even, because I think they are so aligned, and at least for the social scientific point of view, it seems an entirely crazy idea that you could keep them actually separately. So I would actually think that, of course I know that there are these communities. The question is how big proportion of the academic community they are actually representing. I think they are just very vocal, but fairly small minority of the entire academic community.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Or perhaps you might be influenced by the Finnish context, which I have no doubt is different from
absolutely. But
European
if you ask the
mainstream.
Finns, this would be absolutely crazy idea.
Yeah. Okay, now we have arrived at the part of our discussion where we have 8 minutes left, and I promise that there will be 10 minutes for the questions and answers, questions from the audience. And now, in all places of the world, in a panel such as this, we have technological problems, because I think that my pad is out of power there. So if somebody sent some questions, they went somewhere, I cannot see them here, but let's take live questions instead. So please, if you want to present questions to the panelists, raise your hand and then wait a little while so that somebody can get the microphone to you, and then please also introduce yourself when you present the question. At least here we have one question.
Hello, I'm a moderator for this conversation. So there was one question that arrived through the chat, and it goes something like this. Since a lot of technology in use these days comes from Silicon Valley, do they in the Silicon Valley have approaches we should adopt or pitfalls we should avoid?
Okay, who wants to take this? Maybe we start with Mr. Lemaitre.
No.
Well, maybe I can comment that, this is of course one of the things that why universities now seem like a slow, moving snails in the world of innovation, because the speed is happening somewhere else. But the reason for that is, of course, that we are looking at, we need to be here. Universities have been here from the 13th century or something like that, and we will be probably here a couple of thousand years more. So, and then you have to maintain integrity, and then you have actually ethical rules for testing things as well. So there's no way of taking shortcuts if you want to do the innovation within the realm of science. And this is, of course, the difference between us. So I think that actually is part of the work, the task for university and academic community in general, to actually be able to say that, now we actually are pushing things that we shouldn't do and actually doing them wrong as well. Because also that all easily leads to the false conclusions, what works and what doesn't. So much of that work in the business, especially in the Silicon Valley, is happening advancement because it by poor chance that they try things and worry later.
And of course, to some extent, there's a lot to learn about the still collaboration between universities and world of industry and society at large. And then, of course, funding, it plays a role. And I must say that I'm pretty sure that in our national paper that we talk about FP10, that we would like to see more money put in the framework program, because definitely it is part of the strategic competitiveness of the EU, and also in Finnish case, still closer collaboration between universities and the world of business is required, and that's why the 4% goal is absolutely necessary, that we find new ways so that we also encourage industry to put more money in development and innovation, and also some of them actually to research also.
So, Mr. Lemaitre, do you want to continue on this? What is European Commission's attitude towards Silicon Valley?
Well, we have some things to learn from the US. I don't know if from Silicon Valley specifically, even though Silicon Valley is quite an accomplished model, let's say, in one field. What I would take from Silicon Valley is also the world of venture capital around it. And here, clearly in Europe, we need to do better on venture capital. It cannot just be public money that provides risk capital, while markets don't function well enough today, and Mr. Letter reminded that this is one of his very strong recommendations, to have a capital markets union. Of course, we need to do what we can through public funds, but one day we should have deep enough markets which provide risk capital to the level that is required. The second point I would make here is perhaps to also give an explanation which comes from Silicon Valley for some differences between the US and the EU, and to suggest that we cannot compare just frontally the US and the EU. I was saying that the EU spends 2.2% of GDP today. The US is more or less at 3.5. But if you look at the public expenditure, the US doesn't spend significantly more than the EU. The whole difference is made by the private sector. But the private sector in a very skewed way. Well, skewed. Today it's a way which functions well. For the US, it is in the world of digital technologies. That is where all that private research money is being mobilized. Now, of course, in Europe, we have a very different economic structure today. It's still a lot about traditional industries like the automotive industry. The automotive industry in Europe makes up 40% of private R&I in Europe. And this then explains also this difference of level of private R&I between the US and Europe. This is not to suggest that we should be happy with our structures. I think this is more to suggest, again, thinking about venture capital and so on, that we need to put much more money on disruptive technologies in Europe, on things which don't exist today and which will be the economic activities of tomorrow.
Okay, I think we still have room for one quick question, if there's anybody willing to pose that question in the audience. Yes, there is one question over there. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mirka Kottperi and I come from VTT Technological Research Center of Finland. And I would like to ask about how do you see the role of innovation ecosystems as abroad, but also the role of technology infrastructures, different type of test beds as enablers for uptake and upscaling of these new technologies, and how can we better create more competitiveness through these fascinating facilities that we have in Europe, what we have in Finland, but most importantly, what we need in the future for the new solutions and innovations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It was a long question to answer in 40 seconds, but who wants to try? We can maybe go a couple of minutes over the time, but
You can start, yes.
Well, telegraphically, I would say that we do need to shed light on the present map of technology infrastructures in Europe, a bit like we have done in a much more structured way for research infrastructures as such. There we have a whole process and we set common priorities for European research infrastructures. For technology infrastructures, I think we need to check whether we have what we need and where we need as well. And this is to also implicitly confirm what you suggested, that these are very important for the diffusion of innovation eventually. So yeah, I wouldn't go further because it's...
okay.
Well, obviously, ecosystems is what we are looking for, so that we have flourishing research, and then we have also companies, private companies. They are big and they are small, they are medium-sized, but this is what we are looking for, and kind of making policies from different sides, research and innovation, so that they could actually align and result in competitive ecosystems. But definitely this infrastructure approach is very important also.
Okay, thank you very much, audience, for your questions, and thank you, our discussants here. It was a very interesting discussion, and at least I have the attitude of Sitius Altius Fortius now in my university work for this day onwards. I also like to thank the organizers of this panel, especially Annika, Jaago, Tuuli Kaunisto, Saara Nuotiokuloon, and Mia Paananen-Dox, who made an excellent background job for me to be able to ask intelligent questions here. Hopefully they were intelligent. So, thank you very much, and Eurooppa-forum, I think this might have been the last session here at this hall today, but we will continue tomorrow and Friday. Thank you, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.